Thank you. Thank you, Tian Hong. Yeah, thank you. So I just thank you, for the wonderful presentations from Mathias and Antonino, and wonderful the vision pictures, So I think we have half an hour, and it's not supposed to be a very formal like panel discussion. I just took some notes while your presentations and to be discussed. But first, before that, I think we just pick the questions in the chat, and we of course welcome any questions from our colleagues in this meeting room anytime during the discussion. And I noticed that I picked the first one. Hold on a second, please. Is regarding whether there are kind of legal consensus regarding the asteroid activities. Is there even consensus where the legal problems and disagreements would be for asteroids? Or do we assume there are enough asteroids for everyone? I believe that the similar discussion in the Hague Working Group, actually in the first draft, it was talking about kind of like we say exhausted mining about a small asteroid. And of course, at that time, I suggested to delete this building block, because at that time, it's around, I think, 2016, 17. There's still very strong concern from international community, from co-viewers, from our colleagues from developing countries. So I suggested to delete, to reserve this question to be discussed in future. Otherwise, it's too sensitive. We're talking about exhausting mining is legal one. But I would like to invite both Mathias and Antonino, any of you who have concerns in this regard, please just go ahead. And Antonino, could you share your views on that regarding this question? Yes.
It's a very interesting question, right? And it is one of the reasons why the discussion on space resources is so complicated, right? Because it very much depends also on where do you do the space resource. So space resource activities on the moon, on Mars, and on asteroids are three completely different games in my view. And this is why the challenge that, for instance, is lying ahead for the Space Resources Working Group is so complicated, because to come up with a set of principles that will be applicable to these three types of activities, which for me are completely different, it's a challenge in itself, because you are completely right. When we exhaust an asteroid, is that appropriation of the asteroid? And so that could actually be, right, a problem with Article 2. If you're going on the moon, we're never coming to the point that we will exhaust the moon, right? The moon will still be there, maybe with few less oxygen or water or whatever, but it will be there. But with small asteroids, once you take it, you took the entire celestial body. And Article 1 or 2 do not make a difference between how big is the celestial body. A piece of rock like this and the moon belong to the same legal category. So this is why, for me, we need to postpone the discussion, as you said, and that's why it makes more sense to come up with specific rules. So we have rules for how do we do space resources on the moon, and that's one thing. And let's talk about this, because that's what we want to do now. Then on Mars, it will be another discussion. We'll do it in 20 years, and on the asteroids even further, right? But let's separate, because otherwise, if we have to come up with general principles, we will end up with discussions like this. And let's say, okay, yes, you can do it, but what if you exhaust the entire thing? And you will create a problem for yourself that you do not need at the moment, because for the moon, this question will never come up, because you will never be able to exhaust the moon. But for asteroids, it's a very legitimate question. That's why, for me, we need different governance systems for different type of resources.
Thank you, Antonino. And before that, I will have to welcome, our colleagues, Mathias and Wilson, Eckhardt, to join this discussion, of course. And Mathias, what do you see, from the policy perspective or industrial perspective, when will it come true, regarding to mine a small asteroid? What would it happen in decades, or because it's super important for the legal discussion, as Antonino just indicated. Mathias, please.
It's such a, it's of course important question. I understand but it's so hard to answer. It's really hard to answer, and you will not get a timing from me. What is very clear is that the focus right now is on the moon, and as Antonino just said, I think I very much agree. It is depending on the celestial body. Probably you can have different approaches, and also the timing is different, and the urgency is also different to solve certain aspects. So for the moment, the focus is clearly on the moon, also and also very much connected to the plans of agencies there. We saw that the Artemis program was mentioned, and also the Chinese-Russian initiative on the International Lunar Research Station. So these are actually the most concrete plans that we have now, rather than plans from companies. We have a lot of plans from companies, but I think in the first phase, these will actually support the ones from agencies, and then gradually also develop into their own markets. And more generally, I think what we will definitely see activities involving space resources within the next 10 years. This is very clear because also we have internationally agreed timelines on this and roadmaps. So this will be the first step. Now on asteroid mining, there are still a lot of companies that plan to do it, and we have one here on the call. This is still ongoing. I think this will come in the second step. Yeah, but again, it's sorry for that. I cannot give you a precise timing. That's
thank you, Mathias. It's very interesting. For me, first time to get access to this domain. I mean, the legal discussion, discussion regarding space resource activity. It's all about asteroid mining at that time. 2000. Like 13 or 12, even before that. Deep space industry, right? Planetary resources. I just watched so many videos, regarding the asteroid mining future. And even, officially for United States, when the draft was discussed in 2014, the title actually is the Space Mining Act, right? It is supporting asteroid mining. But things just changed, as you said, and we have the confirmed the roadmap, no matter for Artemis project or the Trans-Russia Lunar Research Station. Definitely lunar activity would be the focus, I think, in the coming, we say 10 years or 20 years. You just reminded me years ago when I attended a panel discussion with Mike Gold, 2015, I think. It's ASO, it's American Association of International Law discussion. And Mike just told me the asteroid mining is nothing. He's the fan of moon exploration, but at that time he was kind of a minority, at that time. But today things changed, of course.
But I think maybe if I may go in the end, I know there are sort of two communities, and for example, at our Space Resource Week, we try to be very broad and really integrate both communities. The reality is you have a lot of common challenges, and for example, a legal and regular challenge is a bit common one. But then you have also a lot of challenges that are completely different, and also opportunities and use cases that are very different. So you will find arguments for both asteroid mining and lunar mining and Martian mining, depending on what you're looking for. And in the end, you're right. At the very start of this, and the 2012, 13, 14, and also the start of the Hague Working Group, there was a lot of focus on asteroid mining, because there were only very few companies actually interested in this, and the few that we had were very much focused on asteroid mining. Now, of course, these are companies, and of course, all of these companies take a huge risk, and you have to accept this risk, and they might survive or not, and then other companies will come up. This is just the normal life of business and industry. And unfortunately, these two companies that we had at the very start, let's say, are a bit less active today. And there are some other companies.
They're gone. Yeah.
One is gone. Let's say one is gone. The other one is still there, but a bit less visible.
I know.
But there you have so many others that joined in the meantime, and actually you really have both. You have some going for the moon and others going for asteroids.
But for me,
I see. Yeah, you would like to comment on that, please.
Yeah, for me, it's no coincidence also that once we switched from asteroid to moon, also the tension release, right? It was like the discussions 5 years ago were much more tension because it was about companies that wanted to get billionaire or trillionaire reach on asteroids. And so why do we even care for these kind of things? When you frame the discussion in, we need resources to have a base on the moon, which will be for the benefit of humankind, and it's a completely different story, right? It makes for more political way to discuss this in a good faith approach. So for me, it's no coincidence that whereas asteroid mining will continue to be discussed, if it's not anymore the focus, and we focus on something that it's more, I would say, meaningful for everybody, then it's much more easy to discuss it, right? And you see it in the type of discussion we have at the international level, I think.
Yeah, Mathias, I saw you just raise your hand. Go ahead, please.
So I'm not a legal expert of any sorts, and if I may share an anecdote, the German committee wanting to go to the moon, a couple of decades ago, asked the question, what should we do to motivate the German public to go? And one of the projects that was not completely seriously discussed was, we go to the moon and we bring back the American flag. So
good idea.
If I tell that anecdote worldwide, everyone is taking it as a joke. And any American colleague who looks at legal issues tells me the American army would go to war for that because you're violating a national heritage site. So just to make progress, one of the things I'm involved in currently is legal issues when you do something together on the space station. Yeah, as much as it is the International Space Station, if you walk out of the European module and use resources in another module, you need a contract. So we have that in place, and we have that in place so that if you do an experiment very low level, the operators know you have documents and documents. Yeah, but this is in operation. We are at the same time grinding towards having Chinese projects for the space station, some cargo ships. That's also going on. And that has been so things fly, so they at least have a reasonably certain legal framework. So the question is there a way to, I'm not saying copy paste, but on one of the problems in preparing especially the Chinese bilateral agreements was that you at times have different legal traditions. Yeah. And just, well, I'm not saying even a hint, but it's sharing an experience that it's not problem-free, but you have memoranda of understanding, and certainly it's bilateral, but you can get things operational and then learn by doing, which I think is not a legal way of making progress, but could learning from other space-related international collaborations be a legal prerequisite, at least, where you can copy things and make progress?
Yeah, thank you, Mathias. I also heard many suggestions. We might borrow something valuable from the cooperation regarding space station, right? International Space Station. But personally, again, I think there are kinds of at least two substantive distinction there. I mean, space station, the rules regarding space station, operation of space station, and activities on the moon. So the first, apparently, they are talking about the rules in different room, right? In a narrow room or on the moon, it's different. So because it means there would be different requirements regarding, we say, notification or non-interference or non-contamination anyway. That's the first point. They are handling with the rules in different room, And the second one, space station, many rules, the code of conduct is regarding the behavior of people, right? But so far, we're still is still remote from us. I mean, about the manned mission on the moon, is still about some unmanned mission at this stage. So I agree we can borrow some legal framework from we say the IGA, right, International Governmental Agreement. But I think right now just in a very minimum extent. we have to think about the special characteristics of the moon activity when we're talking about rules making. And the last comment again regarding this question, just as both Antonino and Mathias mentioned, there are some question actually legal challenges is common to all kinds of space resources activities, no matter it's about the moon, Mars, or asteroid. Just as I mentioned, like what would be the legal character of legal resources of the natural resources? What would be the basic principle for such kind of activities? And what would be the legal character of the right over the resources, no matter from the moon or the asteroid? That's the common question to be resolved, unsettled questions. And also there's special concern regarding asteroid mining. So that's why I think in the practical perspective, I mean, during the international framework establishment regarding the moon activities, it can provide or create an atmosphere, a benign atmosphere for the next move, to talk about the exhausted mining. But it should be, again, it's an evolutionary routine there. But now it will be very difficult. And then I pick another two questions. One is regarding the Chinese legislation. I reserve this one at last. But another one I think is a common question to all of us. It's about whether a state, they can just prohibit the space resources activities of their private sectors. So basically, for me, I think international recognition is different matter, but a state definitely under international law, they have the legislative sovereignty to handle with the activities carried on by the private sectors under their jurisdiction and control, no matter it's a personal jurisdiction or territorial jurisdiction. So this is totally a discretion of a country. And Antonino, do you have any comments in this regard about this question?
Yes, thanks for you. I would say that they can, and to a certain extent they should, right? It really depends on the activity. So this is pretty clear to me under Article 6 of the Aerospace Treaty. Private activities in outer space are allowed only to the extent that they are permitted, right? So it is a very different approach. States, they are covered by the freedom to use celestial bodies, so they don't need permission to do any kind of activity. But a private entity always needs a state to say, yes, you can do it. And this is not just a general permission, it's about how do you do it. So the permission should not be just, okay, let's do it and do whatever. It's, okay, you can do it, and these are the rules you have to follow. So under Article 6, you have to authorize and supervise, and the state has to make sure that the activity is complying with the Aerospace Treaty. So definitely the Luxembourgish government, but any kind of government, the Chinese government or the US government, if a US company or a Chinese company wants to mine the moon or any other celestial body and they don't ask for permission, they will stop them. They have to stop them. It's not just about whether they will do it, it's that if they don't do it, it's a violation of international law, because they have to make sure that there is a framework for whatever they are doing. And that's why you have legislation to make sure that there are rules in place to that end.
Thank you, Antonino. And the last question I see is about the legal uncertainties in China regarding the space research activity. I think, again, it's a general obstacle, I think, to all of us. But I would like to share my experiences first, since I'm also the drafter, one of the drafters of the Chinese national space law. And I suggested, and I considered to follow, the U.S. legislation, Luxembourg legislation, but you see, it's too early to China. I mean, to confirm such kind of ownership or property right in national law. It's very sensitive. It's a political issue. So I just stepped back. I wrote the draft as okay. Private sector, including natural persons, they are encouraged to be engaged in space resources activities. That's it. So we just keep a general expression there. It indicates it is legal, of course, but no guarantee about the rights, expressly. And another uncertainties, I think, both to also to United States. who would be the responsible agency to grant the license or to register such kind of rights? It's an unsettled issue to United States as well, I think. It's just, okay, such kind of right is there, that's the guarantee, but no specific operational, measures followed up so far. It's supposed to be the NASA or FAA or FCC or the commercial office of the Commerce Department. It's not clear, or the State Department. So I think that's the common legal uncertainties to all of us. To China, again, that's the same. Which one? CSA, who has the legitimate, the authority to give a license for mining, for space mining? It's not clear yet, because according to our national law, it would be very difficult nowadays, to create a new license, administrative license. It would be very difficult. That's not the direction in general. We are just trying to release, to set the private sector free. So that's the technical issues now to China specifically. So, and Mathias, yes, please. Any
Sorry,
comment?
if I may, I'll just want to mention that I don't know if you had the opportunity, but I really like the Japanese law, which is the last of this space resources law. There is still no official translation, but we had the privilege of listening to Professor Setsuko Aoki at the Galloway Symposium, and she provided a very nice overview. I think that must be available online somehow. I would encourage everyone to go and look at it, because what I like of the Japanese law, not that I don't like the others, but the specifics of the Japanese law is that they also make an obligation when you get a space resource license to share certain information. I come back to my previous point. So under the Japanese law, information on, I think, I have it here in my notes, purpose, duration, location, method, and activity have to be shared publicly, right? In Japan, the Japanese government has the obligation to share them with the rest of the international community. There are also exemptions for commercial rights and IP rights, but the fact that a legislation says if you do a space resource activity, you have to share certain information, I think that's a very, very smart step in order to coordinate better.
Thank you, Antonino. Thank you so much, because I did not see your English version either. But as you said, the such kind of report obligation is it a kind of a prerequisite for the private sector to share such kind of information internationally, or?
I think it's, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, please. You know what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's part of the application process. So when they apply for getting a license, they have to share this information with the government, and with the understanding that the government will make them publicly available for everyone.
I agree with that. So it's kind of like a censorship.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's a strong word, but in a way, it's like when you apply, you have to give this information, and then you know that they will be shared. And if you don't want them to be shared, you have to apply for an exemption. And this will be granted only to the extent that it's justified.
It's reasonable. It's just like the domain of remote sensing data sharing,
Exactly. Yeah.
It's reasonable and workable. That's great.
I'm curious what Mathias thinks of this mechanism, actually.
Yeah, Mathias, do you have any comment on that, about the legal uncertainties, domestically so far, to Luxembourg maybe?
No, I cannot go now into details. What I can say is that I think that our law is already quite specific on the requirements that the companies need to submit when they want to get an authorization of the Luxembourg government. And we are currently working on sort of templates and guidelines for companies to consider when they submit an authorization. But again, we put a lot of efforts in our law to be as comprehensive as possible already to make clear what they need to submit to us, and of course the idea behind that is that we get full transparency on what is planned, on the mission, that we have all the required details, but also that we are able to assess that this mission is of course in line with our international obligations, coordinated, that we are able to coordinate also with other players to make sure that we don't get interference, for example. While at the same time, I would say overall, and that's also important for us, is having enough flexibility to allow for different kind of missions, because a mission is not equal to a mission. I mean, you will have very small ones with very, very low impact, but very important at the start of all of this to show what it is we need to regulate. So, but then over the years, of course, missions will grow and become much more complex. And then, of course, we want also a law that is able to deal with this kind of more complex missions.
Yeah, thank you, Mathias. Actually, we're talking about the matter, the interaction between national management and international governance, global governance there. And I see we have several minutes, and I just take the advantage to raise a simple question to our panelists. So the first one, we see the project, Artemis project, and the China-Russia lunar research project, station project. And the people are just discussing about the possibilities, for the participants, the signatory states to Artemis Accord, to join in the China-Russia project. Whether it would be, it's possible. Everything is possible, of course, but whether it is workable for the member states to Artemis Accords to cooperate with China and Russia in their project. What do you see about that? Of course, it's just from a personal perspective. That's the first one. So, Antonino, would you like to take the floor first, maybe? Please.
I mean, I think Mathias should go first, but I'll tell you what I heard.
I just give some time to Mathias for the consideration. Please go ahead.
It's very easy, Guyo. We of course we want to cooperate on both sides. As I mentioned during my presentation, we have signed agreements with both the US and China. So and we also talk a lot to organizations, companies, research centers from both countries. So for us, of course, ideally, we would like to cooperate on both sides.
I understand.
Very short and easy content.
Yeah, Antonino, what do you see on that?
Well, I guess, I mean, coming from a signatory to the Accords, that says it all, right? But my wish would be that, of course, this can be the case. And I see that in the document, at least, there is nothing preventing this to happen, right? So there is no clause in the Artemis Accords that says you do not have to sign with others, where you cannot work with others. What I find interesting is that in the Artemis Accords, you see that formally, at least, the principles that you have in the Artemis Accords are not limited to the Artemis program. So they are applicable to all activities that these countries do beyond low Earth orbit. So that means that if a signatory to the Artemis Accords is doing another project with China and Russia, they will still be bound by the Artemis Accords also for that project. So that's the interesting part for me, right? To keep in mind, because maybe China and Russia would not want to be, this is a way to indirectly be bound as well, right? Because if one of your partners has to comply with certain principles, then you also have time to comply, right? So that's an interesting mechanism. The fact that the rules apply to all activities you do, including those with others, and maybe those others will have something to say about this. That's interesting.
Oh, thank you, Antonio. It's a good point. I think I would not like to say it's a legal obstacle, but it's an unsettled issue. What it means is that it's necessary for United States and China, just to sit down to discuss about their opinions, the developments of Artemis Accord. But it's hard to, happen maybe. But the satellites of Starlink approaches the Chinese space station, that might provide an opportunity anyway, for them to have a bilateral dialogue in the near future. And I see the time is up, and thank you so much, Mathias and Antonino and our colleagues for your participation. And I just give back the floor to Tianhong, to the organizer. Thank you.
Thanks.